say certainty is a sin. I thought certainty sells.
Yeah. Well, Travis, if you would read my book carefully, you would realize that I'm not actually saying that certainty is sin. What I'm saying is that the need to stay certain when you've gotten to a point where you're not certain anymore, the sin is like, I've got to get back to the way things were, when in fact maybe God is actually pushing you out to think of God differently. It's the metaphor of, if your faith is becoming, quote, weak, well, the wall is crumbling. And what you have to do is you have to build the wall, put it back together again. That's a bad metaphor, I think. That's the metaphor of like, listen, there's some mortar coming out, a couple bricks have fallen, let's get it all back to the way it was. Let's go back. To me, that's the sin of certainty. It's the sin of needing to stay where you are instead of accepting the challenge of a journey of faith. Not a wall, but a journey or a pilgrimage where you have to go someplace. You're not allowed to stay where you're in control. You're not allowed to stay safe. You actually have to go out there. And sometimes that journey is beautiful and glorious. Like today in Houston, it's not humid, it's really nice out. Is it like this every day?
Yep. Every day.
Like the Garden of Eden?
That's right.
Like the book of Revelation, the new heavens and the new earth, right?
That's right.
Okay, anyway.
We're sinless.
You're sinless. Yeah, sometimes the journey is like today in Houston. Other times it's like, well, August in Houston, probably, right? Or, sometimes it's dark and sometimes you don't know where you're going. Sometimes you run off the road into a ditch and you fall down a hill and you're bloodied and you have to get back up again. That's just the way it is. You don't get to stay safe. So the sin of certainty is in not accepting that challenge and trusting God to move forward, but wanting to stay safe behind a wall or in a fortress. And it is sin, not in the sense like God is going to blast you, but you're selling God short. You're not actually trusting God. And that's why, my book, The Sin of Certainty, Why God Desires Our Trust More Than Our Correct Beliefs. It's not that beliefs are wrong to have. I have them. But what's more important is trusting God personally than making sure you have the correct beliefs. Sometimes correct beliefs come and go. If you're just an active person living and aware of your surroundings, you will question what you believe. The trick of it all is maintaining a posture of trust even when things don't make sense. Even when things are falling apart, let's say intellectually for you. The package is now wet and it's moldy and it's falling apart. It's not like it was before, The trick is to maintain the posture of trust in the midst of that. That's a risk. That's trust. It is wrong to say, I don't accept that. I'm going to go back to the way it was and stay safe.
Okay, well that's not biblical, but that's fine if you believe that.
I sure do.
Peter, which is in the Bible.
Peter, if that is your name.
Peter ends, right? You're ending. Oh, it ends. But anyway, you're the ends part.
Mm-hmm. Hey, the Bible messes with your beliefs all the time anyway, right? I mean, biblical characters are debating with what they know and what they don't know about God. It's just the way it is. You can't wrap your brain around God. Now, you can wrap your brain around God, let's say, sufficiently in stages in our lives, but to come to a point of clarity about God and say, well, I'm done. I don't have to move anymore. You're going to have some surprise in your life where that structure makes half as much sense as it did or no sense at all. And then you have the choice to make, am I now going to trust God anyway, or am I only going to trust God because life makes sense? See, that's sort of the challenge of the book of Job. Job worships you because everything makes sense to him. Now the question is, what's he going to do if things stop making sense? And one thing Job never does, he never becomes an atheist. Right? He never stops believing in God. He struggles with God through the whole process, and at the end he's vindicated. Hey, new believer, if you want to read a book, read that one.
You could just courageous, let's say, just wants to be part of a tribe, and it was just a level of his human consciousness, and he was just taking the abuse. And
If you want to believe that, you go right ahead.
codependent.
I don't know, codependent, maybe. I guess you can be codependent on God. I think that's part of the sin of certainty. I think you can be codependent with religion or church or anything, right? He wasn't codependent with the tribe because he rejected his friends. He was actually out of the tribe. He was by himself. And he was courageous, I think. Or just convicted. I don't know, or maybe just honest with himself. I know. If believing in God, to use our language, if believing in God means I have to accept what my biblically correct friends are saying, I want nothing to do with it. And at the end of the book, the winner is Job, right? Not his friends. There's got to be a lesson in there worth listening to, I think. What it does, it's things like that that challenge a biblicistic attitude, by which I mean every verse is right, regardless of life context. It just is always and that's why all the propositions have to fit, why there are no contradictions in the Bible, that sort of thing. Jews have been recognizing contradictions in the Bible since before Christianity. Everybody knows they're there, they're trying to work them out. What do you do with them, right? But I just think that's why the Bible is just such a fascinating book that deconstructs a sort of a biblicistic attitude. But if you think of the Bible as, to use Christian language, a means of grace, that text that you can access and read, and things will hit you in ways that they hit you when you need them to hit you, right? Not as an answer book, but as a means of communing with God. And I think maybe God, by graciousness, allows these writings to take on that role in the life of the church. God accepts this as an offering, so to speak, where we can commune with God through struggling with the text. And it doesn't take long to struggle with the text. You just have to read it. And if you want to start with Genesis, go ahead. Genesis 1, 6 days? Okay, I don't get that. Genesis 2, another story of creation that is incompatible with the verse. By chapter 2, verse 4, you have a problem. What are you going to do about that? Oh, and guess what? You're not the first person to have thought of it. People have been talking about this stuff since, people a lot smarter than any of us have been thinking about this and talking about it and writing about it for over 2 millennia.
You just talk louder or change the subject.
You could, or welcome to the conversation. Welcome to the journey of faith that engages this text seriously and honestly, without thinking my role is to bring the conversation to an end. No, your role is to continue the conversation through the lens of your own experience, both individually and communally. And this is something that, as I never grow tired of saying this, and to my students, to my college students, there's something that Judaism does better there, allowing a debate to continue rather than closing it off. Jewish literature like the Talmud, there are differences of opinion on every topic, and those opinions are not resolved into one final opinion. The dialogue stays there. And I think Christians have understood that too, to a certain extent, but not as well. John Levinson, one of my favorite Jewish theologians, I'm paraphrasing him a little bit, but I remember him saying this in a class once, and he has it in writing someplace. But he says, for Jews, the Bible is a problem to be solved. For Christians, it's a message to be proclaimed. There's a huge difference in how they read the Bible, because for Christians, contradictions and tensions are a problem that cannot exist, because the Bible is a message. For Jews, it's those tensions and problems are an invitation to engage the text and to commune with God in community through engaging the text. That is difficult to understand. And those difficulties lead you to think that there is a deeper substance to Scripture than just what you see on the surface. And I think a lot of Christians have understood that in history, modern evangelicalism and fundamentalism basically has not, and have reduced the text to basically a pamphlet on what God is like, instead of a debate about what God is like. That spans millennia. The Bible's a neat book. It really is worthy of adult attention, and not just, Sunday school and getting quick answers. It's worth much more than just get up in the morning with my cup of coffee and read a chapter and I've done my duty. It's in community and listening to voices, or listening to the diversity of voices among Christians today in the world and among Christians throughout history, and realizing you're a very small part of a very large conversation. And there's no thought that you've had that somebody else hasn't had already. And there's no problem that you see that somebody else hasn't seen already. And whatever solution you find, others have found and others have contradicted. Well, then what's the anchor of my faith? I thought it was the Bible. No, it's God. But how do I know God except for the Bible? You do through struggling with it, not for using it as a 10-point pamphlet of what to believe. But that's a bit messy. Yep. I didn't make up the rules. It is very, very messy. I wish it were neater. Maybe I don't wish it were neater, but it doesn't matter what I wish. It's not. It's complex, and it's a good thing, not a bad thing.